May I have your attention, please? At this time, please turn off your cell phone. Disruptions and outbursts will not be tolerated. You will be allowed to speak during the citizens' comments.
The meeting is called to order. Today is Thursday, February the 11th, 2016, 7 p.m. Please stand for the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, and forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the might. I'd like to establish a quorum. We have Councilman Tejada, Councilman Ortiz, Councilman Nieto, and Councilman Miller. We have a quorum. Now the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, we will entertain citizen comments, and remember that these are 5 minutes each. So if you would form a line. State your name, please.
Eric Rodriguez. At this time, what I would like from Mayor Sherry Castillo is a public apology for throwing me out of the last meeting.
The warning was removed. There will be no apology. Thank you.
So as y'all know, there is a recall. There was plenty of signatures for the recall. It was a very substantial amount, which I know some of y'all felt that y'all were not going to get, that we were not going to get. That's the voice of the people. The voice of the people demand to be heard, as you can see behind me. There's a lot of people in front of me, a lot of people behind me. Y'all think that y'all can just go on and continue doing unlawful things, but this is just an uproar from them. You can't calm the voice of the people. Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Carter Thomas. Last time I spoke before the board, it was a bit uncomfortable. I usually don't go into my military background, but I thought it was appropriate. This time I'm a bit more subtle in what I'm going to say. I think everyone would agree that a good working definition of tyranny is the exercise of power without authority, or the exercise of unjust power. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident. created equal. And they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, or people to leave property. The next clause, though, is pretty informative. It tells what governments are about. That to secure these rights from God, governments are instituted among men, and they draw their just powers from the consent of the governed. And finally, he went on to write that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. This is exactly what the citizens of Floresville are demanding. I think let me give you two examples. On February 4th, 2016, approximately 8:20 p.m., a Floresville police officer went to take a statement from the mayor, as I understand it. And there were 3 members there. Sounds to me like an illegal meeting. Also, in the last meeting, it certainly looked like official oppression to me. So I have to say a couple of things. Shame on the council for meeting illegally. Shame on the Floresville Police Department for not breaking up an illegal meeting. I have an opportunity tonight to do the right thing. If you're that confident, put it to a vote. We'll see if you stay in power. If you're not, then the people have spoken. But unjust power is power that is not the consent of the governed.
Wilson County. I'd like to read you, and you may recall the letter that I'm going to be reading you. It's very brief, but I think very, very appropriate, and something that I hope you take to heart. To our existing council, may you not sell yourself or persuade a decision for a personal gain or an interest of others other than our beloved city. Make all amends to all. We are all guilty. All sides are guilty. Leave dirty and old school politics out. Our future is at stake. Get more involved with our city. That way you can better your decision making. Don't be one-sided. Listen to both sides and base your decision for the best interest of the city. Get interracially involved and not politically involved. There is no room for dividing us. You should be uniting us. Learn to forgive and forget the past and move forward. Remember, we are elected officials. Show some dignity and respect to others, and it will follow. Give hope a chance and make that change for the better for our city. May God bless Floresville. Thank you, Floresville. I will always be there to help the ones in need as a concerned citizen. Does that ring a bell with any of you up there? Any of you that have managed to look at me while I read this? That is from ex-city councilman Chris Talamantes. And he left city council because morally and ethically he could not remain on it. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Fitzgerald Donahoe, lifelong citizen of Wilson County. My ancestors date back to the 1600s in this area. They're probably rolling around in their graves about all the ruckus going on. What I pray for is unity, peace, that we find common ground somewhere. We're not out to burn anybody at the stake. It's not a witch hunt. I've heard some very angry citizens, and I get it. I get it. I've learned to be a little bit slower to judgment and watch and listen just a little bit more. It's taken me a long time. Losing a son, brothers, uncles, aunts, all in 3 years is pretty tough, and tends to bring, good Lord, a little bit closer to your heart. I've done so with the help of my sister, Mary Helen Teakin, who I watched in her business as a hospice nurse tend to dying people like her brothers. Something that was some of the most incredible transformations I've ever seen. Transformations being the theme. All I'm asking is that we put, we talked about separation of church and state. I understand about separation of organized religion and state, but we do not need to separate God and state. Please put God in your heart before you make any decisions, whatever decision that is, breakfast or business. And please, all I ask is that you just think about everyone, not just special interest or a few, because I don't know what anybody's been approached with or anything. And quite frankly, my care is for the well-being of the entire county, because my ancestors are buried in Marcelina, Sullivan Springs, and Floresville Cemetery. I have no Canary Islanders that I know of, but I do know people who come from the original Canary Island family, and I don't think they'd be very happy with the turmoil. May we find peace and common ground in our meetings, our dealings, and when we greet each other day to day. I harbor no ill feelings. I just hope that we can come to what's right for the county and the citizens of Wilson County. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager.
Please state your name.
My name is Tomas Robles, and I want to thank everybody for coming out here and supporting what's going on right now. And I just want to let everybody know that I was born and raised here in Floresville, and I spent 21 years in the military also. And I do believe that there's a lot of people here and right now that they believe in the Constitution. And we the people, we expect to follow the Constitution, follow the charter, the city charter. But we don't have a city government here. We have 3 people trying to run the city. And I think that we need to make those changes. Going back to saying that I spent my time in the military, I put myself out there to defend my country just like all my fellow veterans. And a lot of them were fallen, and a lot of them were dead because they believed so much in the American flag. And that's what we need to do, man. So if you don't believe in the American Constitution, we the people, you need to step down.
Mayor, City Council, fellow citizens. I'm going to comment on item number 6A. At a time when we frequently read about and hear about police excesses, we should feel fortunate and grateful that we have a police force that is effective and sensitive to our needs. My personal experience with them has always been positive. I find them to be responsive and professional. More importantly, they have a presence in the community. Police cannot serve our community effectively if they're not there. That's not our case. I think this attitude stems from their chief, Lorenzo Herrera. He is a true professional. He is always respectful and in turn earns the respect of the community. I know him well, and I have never seen him lose his equilibrium. He fills his position well. Now, I don't really know what's proposed by your item 6A, but if it's in any way adverse, I respectfully ask that you not even honor it in any motion to go into executive session or have a second on it. Chief Herrera deserves better than that. Also, a word on the recall petition. Those that support the petition would have us believe that the 500 signers constitute the will of the people. They would have you ignore charter procedures and just give them what they want, the ouster or the 3 targeted people. What about the will of the other 6,500 or so people that live in Floresville? Their will is incorporated in their charter. So I say, just follow the charter. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. We will go on to the public hearing regarding the submission of an application to the Texas Department of Agriculture for the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program. And we have Ms. Oralia Cardenas.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Oralia Cardenas with GrantWorks. The public hearing is a requirement of the program. The Community Development Block Grant Program is funded by HUD, and it is administered by the Department of Agriculture. The public hearing requires a notice in the paper and also that the hearing be held after 5 p.m. with a 7 days comment period. So this is a requirement that we need to fulfill in order to apply for a planning capacity building fund application. That deadline is March 22nd. So in this part of the agenda, the eligible uses of CDBG funds or Community Development Block Grant funds is very broad. It includes water, wastewater, sewer, drainage, and there are different fund categories that the state sets, but they also set priorities. And so therefore, each of these funds has their own criteria that is reviewed at the state for funding. The Planning Capacity Building Fund is one of those funds under the CDBG program. The amount of, the maximum under the Planning Capacity Building Fund is $55,000. However, based on the population of Floresville, the maximum is $39,705 with a required match of $7,941. And so what is the, I can go over the different studies that the Planning Capacity Building Fund application would be addressing in the item under new business related to the resolution. So this part of the public hearing is just to review what's eligible, what the deadline is, what kinds of uses the city has in fact received Community Development Block Grant funds or CDBG funds in the past, including water improvements, sewer improvements, drainage, Main Street improvements. So there has been some improvements done with these funds. Also, there are numerous requirements that would apply should the city get funded, including environmental review, affirmative for housing, the payment of Davis-Bacon wages for those construction projects, and all those processes will be part of the contract should the city get funded with 2016 funds under CDBG. And that concludes my comments on the public hearing.
Thank you. As she stated, this concludes the public hearing, and we're going to go ahead and do the CN. Yes.
If I may, since it's a public hearing, we do have to open it for citizen comment before we close the hearing.
All right. We don't want to wait for the CNA to have Comments?
Before we can close the public hearing section, we have to take
All
a
right,
vote on the
thank you.
public.
Are these 1 minute?
No, this is open,
All right,
under
then
public
we open
hearing.
it for discussion. Anyone who has a comment or a question, can you come up to the podium? Council?
Now you can close.
Thank you. Public hearing is now closed. And in interest of Ms. Cardenas's time, we will go on to new business for item A. CNA to approve the resolution 2016-001 authorizing the filing of a Texas Community Development Block Grant Program application to the Texas Department of Agriculture, and authorizing the mayor to act as the city's executive officer and authorized representative in all matters pertaining to the city's participation in the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program. Ms. Cardenas?
The resolution before you is also a requirement of the program. The resolution states that the city authorizes the submittal of the application to the Department of Agriculture. It authorizes the mayor as the executive officer to sign documents related to the grant. The resolution also states that the requested amount in the application is $39,705 with a required match of $7,941. The types of studies that the application funded would fund, it would be updating base planning such as land use map, base map, housing, population, updating all those numbers for the city, street condition study, water, wastewater, drainage study, capital improvements program, which would identify the needs and project those types of projects that the city could possibly undertake with a listing of potential funding sources for those improvements. Also, central business study, economic development, zoning ordinance, and subdivision ordinance review. Thank you.
Council, do you have any questions?
Ms. Turner, what is our anticipated usage of the funds if granted?
Our anticipated use, if funded, will be to focus on our downtown revitalization plan that we're hoping to put in place, as well as some of the fundamental zoning and other maps that we need for the city of Floresville to help us to plan for the future. We also, as Mr. Romeo said, that part of that will help to identify where we can find further grants and further funding to support some of those activities that the plan will actually lay out.
It is an update to it's a comprehensive plan, basically, for the city, an updating of mapping and other studies for future development, future growth.
So what's the next step after the approval tonight?
The next step is that we will then prepare the application. The application, we will have notice in the paper that the application is available for public comment, and that notice will be published 5 days before the deadline of March 22nd. On March 22nd, we will submit the application to the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture, it is a very competitive process. They will review and evaluate the application, score it, and hopefully the city of Floresville will be successful and get funded. It takes a few months for them to go through that process, 6 to 9 months sometimes.
I don't remember, but do the CBDGs qualify for parks also?
Yes, except that it is not very competitive. Generally, parks, usually what's competitive and scores well, that's usually water and sewer.
Sewer and drainage?
Yes,
Okay.
the fund that's available, the Community Development Fund, usually is where the funding is for that type of improvement. And those scoring criteria are set up at the regional level and could be Alamo Cog. And usually in most regions of the state, 24 of them, water and sewer is usually the top priority. And so most of the points go toward projects of that type.
When are the matching funds due?
As the plan is developed, you know, we will work with Henrietta to determine what the cycle of the payments to prepare the plan. So the next step, this application, we do this no charge to the city. So we take a risk, you know, that hopefully the application will get funded, but there is then a procurement process where The city will publish in the paper and send out notices for those consultants that might be interested. So there's, although GrantWorks is helping you with the application, there is still a procurement process in the future when the grants are awarded.
Ms. Turner?
Go ahead.
This is expected this fiscal year?
No, we don't know what the lead time is in reference to how long it'll be before we are awarded, and so it'll probably be next fiscal year. But one of my directives that the council gave was actually a comprehensive plan for 5 and 10 years, and so this will fall in line with helping us prepare a comprehensive plan.
So there's no chance it's going to occur within this fiscal year?
We don't know how long it's going to be for the funding. I can't say yes or no.
My concern is this: I think it's a great opportunity for the city, but we listened to the comptroller that the last financial report said that sales tax revenues are down by as much as 15%. Clearly, this matching amount is not in this year's budget. If this comes to resolution this year, 2 questions. Where would that funding come from? And is it possible to meet those funding requirements with in-kind?
No, it is a hard match. It's not an in-kind match. It's a financial match. And so the answer to that question is no. And then as far as if we're able to make that, I don't anticipate that we will have such shortfalls that we will not be able to fund it if it happens this year. But if it's a 6 to 9 months award period, we have to wait that long to see if they're going to award it, and then we have to see if we're going to get funded. So we don't know.
And also, just, it's a 2-year contract, so even before you get funded, there's still a process where you have to go through the contract process. TDA has to issue a contract, it has to get signed, sent back, and then there's a 2-year period for the plan to actually be completed.
So in all likelihood, we're looking at next fiscal year, and this could be put into next year's budget.
Yes, and it sounds like maybe even next 2 fiscal years.
Thank you.
I have a question. Ma'am, can we use this funding for ADA purposes here in City Hall or PD?
Not for actual construction improvements, no.
Any other discussion? Council?
No. If there's no other discussion, Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the resolution 2016-001, authorizing the funding of the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program to the Texas Department of Agriculture, and authorizing you, Mayor, to act as the CEO and authorized representative.
A motion has been made. May I have a second?
Second, Madam Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Before we vote, we'll take citizens' input. There are no questions by citizens, so we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed?
409.
Thank you, motion carries. Ms. Cardenas, thank you so much for driving down here.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome to stay, or you may leave, whatever you wish. Thank you. We will return to old business. CNA to approve meeting minutes for the special meeting on January 7, 2016.
Madam Mayor, a couple corrections, please. Uhaz is not spelled J-U-H-A-E-Z, it's spelled J-U-H-A-S-Z. You cite Ms. Uhaz several times in these meetings. And under the citizen's comment of Ms. Joanne Uhaz, your second sentence reads, Ms. Uhaz referenced a letter mailed out from Mayor Castillo referring that she is not a Jim Miller crony and stated she will not be purchasing a bumper sticker. The way that reads, the mayor is not a Jim Miller crony and the mayor is not purchasing a bumper sticker. The sentence structure needs a little bit of work because I think it was Ms. Uhaz saying that she was not a Jim Miller crony and she was not purchasing a bumper sticker.
Well, I don't think the mayor is a Jim Miller crony.
Madam City Secretary, did you get the corrections?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, any other corrections?
Do we need a footnote defining what a Jim Miller crony is? Or
It's slang for friend, I think.
okay, all right.
Right?
Well, whatever, however you want to define it. All right, may I have a motion to approve as amended?
Well, in the citizens' comments, Mr. Carter Thomas, is this the meeting that he referred to us as the dictators from Central America? Was that the January 7th meeting? I'm not sure. No?
Not that one?
The gangsters
I think it was a more recent one.
are the gangsters. The gangsters.
Okay,
The gangsters.
all right, well, let's move on. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes as amended?
And that's the reason.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Raise your right hand. All those opposed? Madam Secretary?
3. I just want, you didn't
Abstain.
abstain. 301.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. Now we have presentation and discussion. The first one is an update on our master parks plan. I'm so glad you're showing it on that site. It shows better, right? You want the lights up, Mr. Kurtz?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. My name is Brent Luck. I'm a team member on the M&S engineering team with Tom Turk that is currently working with the Floresville Economic Development Council Corporation, in the development of a parks master plan for citywide planning. We're coming to you tonight to give you an update on where we're at. We've been working with the EDC since November. We're not coming before you tonight for any kind of action item. We certainly wanted to give you an update of what we've been doing over the last couple of months. So with that, we'll go ahead and proceed. I wanted to lead off with the schedule that we have been proceeding with. In November, we started conducting an inventory of the city's 8 parks, both as a physical inventory and a photographic inventory. And right after that, we also led into an online survey that we published to get citizen input in the direction that they like for their future parks to go. November and December, we also had 2 public meetings, actually right here, that in order to receive citizen input and over again the direction of the park system and the recreation programs associated with it. As you can see on the slide too, we have started to talk with EDC about overall goals and updating the plan the existing plan that the city has. And an important component of those goals are also to help drive the priorities. This plan is a plan that is a 10-year overall view of the city and to help the city make decisions over the next 10 years in capital improvements for parks. And identifying those priorities are certainly very, very important. Where we're at currently is that we are working on both facility-based, meaning different park amenities and what those park ratios or what those amenities should be for your population base, as well as acreage-based ratios. And then probably the real meat of where the plan will be referenced by city staff, and again in front of you, is with an implementation plan at the end that outlines those steps over the next 10 years. I mentioned with the inventory and with the 8 parks, we're certainly looking from the citywide and mapping using the GIS components. The next slide will show that one of the things that we're doing for each of the parks, I mentioned earlier, we're doing a photographic inventory. Tom, can you go ahead and take to the next one? But what we're also doing is that we're documenting the actual amenities that are in each of your parks, how many are there, as well as their condition, and also whether they are accessible under the guidelines of ADA accessible guidelines. One of the reasons that we do a needs assessment, which is essentially reaching out to the public for public input, is we need to have that input in order to drive the overall priorities. Tom and I can certainly come up with our own priorities, but we want to make sure that it's reflective of what your citizens' needs. We did that in a couple of different ways. I mentioned earlier the survey. Go ahead, Tom. In November and December, as you can see from the snapshot of your webpage, we had a link onto the city's website in which folks could interact with the survey. It was also on the homepage of the EDC website as well. When you clicked on that, this was the simple format that we had it in. We had, I believe it was 21 questions that we had open for about a 6-week period, and of that we had 304 responses in response to that survey. I'm not going to go over all of the survey questions and responses tonight, but certainly when we come to you in April with a proposed plan, we'll have all those listed, as well as comment and action items in the appendix. But I wanted to give you a flair, as well as our residents that are here tonight, the type of things that are being shown, in the plan. The previous one was a graphic where we asked just conditions assessments of the park. So we have graphic answers from the survey graphically represented. But one of the things that I also wanted to point out, and one of the most powerful questions in our survey was question number 8 here, where it was just an open-ended question, and quite frankly we just asked, what's the single most important thing that's important to you in regards to the City of Floresville parks? It is basically, if we had edited it, it's only been for grammatical errors, and so you can really see the tone and the tenor that sometimes gets lost through the graphic representation of the survey results. Again, some of the things that we're doing is looking at gaps analysis. As far as in this particular one, we asked how are needs being met, and with that, you can see just different deltas of how well the opinions are of different park amenities and park uses are being met with through the city. I mentioned priorities, and one of the ways that we get to those priorities is that we talk about a weighting. And in this particular question, we asked, what are the 3 most important park amenities to you or members of your family? And through that, we weighted those to get a list of the items so that we could have a priority of those items. On the next slide, you'll see that we took kind of that weighted list and then started to break it up into a high, moderate, and low category as far as park priorities. There's 4 items that are listed that you see there on the slide. And as we go to the next slide, you'll see that we have broken out those 4. Those 4 that were highlighted were actually indoor park priorities. And so when you see the indoor, the multi-rec indoor center, indoor shooting range, and the senior center, we broke those out. One of the reasons we did that is because the city is interested in potential Texas Parks and Wildlife grant. If you are able to take out the indoor amenities, certainly indoor amenities usually have a couple more zeros attached with the development and planning of those amenities. And so by breaking out indoor and outdoor activities, or amenities, you're able to, again, make it more competitive, but also very specific with your grant item. On the outdoor activities, priorities, again, this slide that we showed this at our public meeting in December to basically get a gauge and say, hey, this is what we've heard. Are we right? Those that were in attendance at that public meeting tend to agree, and we've also asked that meeting at our subsequent meetings with your EDC. So currently, this is where our park priorities are listed and where we're moving forward to. One of the most important questions that we asked, although we didn't know it at the time we were asking it that it would be important, was where do you live within the city? As this graph shows, actually the image on the right shows how we broke up the city into different quadrants, with Area 5 being anything that wasn't within the city's, or within the Floresville city limits. The pie chart on the left that you see, and specifically on the left part of that graph where it says 48.7, are those residents that responded to the survey that we put out that do not live within the city limits of Floresville. And so we've seen that before, where in working with past municipalities where a lot of leadership and a lot of time and commitment comes from outside the city in supporting different parks. So what we have looked at and what that showed us was that very obviously that your parks support a lot of activity by residents that are county residents and not specifically city residents. And so as we're moving forward, one of the things that we wanted to share is that we're developing population-based guidelines on a population that is not specific just to the city of Floresville, because we know that your parks are serving more than just the city limit residents. Currently, what we've done is, if you look at the graphic on the bottom, that's the service area of the Floresville Independent School District. And what we're doing is syncing our plan from population and population projection with the ISD's plan, so that it has validity and also is pretty reflective of that growth. You can see that with the enlargement numbers, the current population that's being represented by that area that's brown is almost 30,000. And so that's how many people live within the area that your ISD is serving, and one that we're looking at as our park growth area. And in comparison with the city's population at 7,470, you can see that that's a big discrepancy as far as the use of planning numbers that we need to look at and the guidance of our park system. So you can see again why this is important is that when you look at the column that says the existing facilities in 2015 for population, we plugged in that 29,000, and one of the things that helps shows us is, if, for example, if you look at baseball fields where we have a recommended guideline of 1 ball field per 5,000 population base, if you do the easy math with the existing 2 baseball fields that are out at City River Park, you can see that the 29,000, or the 2 times 5,000 would be 10,000, and you can start to see some of that deficit and some of that gap analysis that we're looking for. So again, with that, we're open to any questions that you might have, but we wanted to give you an update of where we are and where we're headed before we come back to you again in April or May.
So in the baseball fields, you would project four new ones? Or
we're still developing that. Yes, just based on our existing population with that number, that's what we're looking at. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Councilman, we're looking at a 10-year projection, the horizon of this, and so we're still benchmarking the growth of where we're going to be in 2025 to see what that ultimate build-out would be. But yes, the 2 that you're referencing are with these numbers are a deficit of the number of ball fields that we have right now.
I know at the EDC meeting the other night, we talked about a quad baseball complex. I don't know, does the surveys indicate anything about a big boys field, something that's going to be high school level type facility?
The survey itself specifically does not. One of the survey represented, if you go back to the priorities list, the baseball was the #1 rated priority that was represented in the survey. In regards to actual field size and dimensions, that's one of the things we're partnering with the local baseball association to make sure that it meets the demographics of what they're looking for as well.
Council, any other questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Do we have the lights?
Can we make it cooler in here? Got kids coughing and people passing out. It'd be nice to be a little cooler.
Thank you.
Is it possible, Ms. Turner, to make it cool? Thank you.
You said this is a 10-year plan.
Yes,
When you
sir.
looked at the the rankings from the people, 1 through 3 or 1 through 12, I think it was your second or third slide. The third item clearly was talking about maintaining the facilities that we have.
You're talking on the written comments?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So that was a feedback that came from the survey.
Yes, sir.
Clearly, the conditions of our fields and our parks are due to years of lack of complete maintenance for whatever reason.
Yes, sir.
Will this 10-year parks plan address maintenance of these facilities and what the city needs to be doing in budgeting and changing in processes over the next 10 years to be able to maintain what we have as well as whatever we have?
It was interesting that you used the word clearly in regards to maintenance being a major item. I would say that with all of our comments, we did a drill of just highlighting how many times maintenance or upkeep came, and you could close your eyes and see just how much of the survey results came back that maintenance is a high priority. When we brought the survey results to the EDC just for discussion, certainly that was the number one non-amenity item that came up, and currently stands as one of our top goals that will be represented in the master plan. As far as we heard a lot, take care of what we have before we plan to move forward. One of the things that the EDC has asked us for is to look at examples of an operations and maintenance plan, certainly so that when the city manager and leadership is putting together the budgets moving forward, that there's some benchmarking that we can look at to make it a little bit more defensible for the city manager to plug in a maintenance type of item. So, long way of answering that yes, maintenance has been identified as a major priority in the plan, and that we're looking at specifically what we can do with different levels of maintenance and identifying funding that's needed for an operations and maintenance plan.
Ms. Luke, you weren't here last week, but I'm sure Mr. Turk has informed you that we've done some engineering studies on the fields. And there's sinkholes in the fields that have been 4 feet deep. At least the young man reported that his child fell into a hole, and his whole leg was into the sinkhole. Well, we started this project 10 years ago. We've been talking about this park 10 years ago, and it's been very, very close to getting completed. When we started 10 years ago, we started talking about sinkholes, okay? Sinkholes in the fields. The report that we heard last week from our engineers, they're no longer sinkholes, there's tunnels under the fields. And for the safety of our children, they recommended that we do some type of remediation and look into build new fields, and that's why you're here. So I think maintenance on that particular part of the park, we can keep on throwing money down those holes, but that's what it's going to be. We're going to throw money down those holes, and it'll never get fixed.
If I could, I'll let you answer him, and then I have a follow-up question if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely correct. The SARA report that came out recommended, they took 3 borings at City River Park, geotechnical borings, and then they also took one that was at basically the area behind the event center. That is their recommendation that we look at possibly long-term wise moving the fields on that end. In particular, with there's different types of soils, the 3 that were at City River Park and one that is more conducive for long-term maintenance. My main item in responding to you is that the inventory that we show includes those fields that are at City River Park. So any kind of taking those, rearranging